Good morning again, health fitness specialist students. This video is just going to be a rundown of chapter 16 and the PowerPoint slides that I have that go along with chapter 16. So just a brief rundown with the slides. I'd like you to view this video prior to our virtual classroom meeting tomorrow at noon, okay? So looking at your slides, you all have these. If you go down to the aerobic design for aerobic training, again, it just goes through those principles of specificity and looking at the different components and things that we can do to manipulate the variables. You know, what mode, what's the intensity, how often, how long, that sort of thing. So as far as exercise mode goes, just a few things to keep in mind. We want to choose an activity that's going to mimic whatever their goal is, right? So noting that machines that might mimic an activity may not elicit the same response. So for example, if running a marathon is a goal for your client that they're going to be running outdoors, running on the treadmill is not necessarily going to elicit that same response. So definitely outdoor running is something that's going to help them to achieve that particular goal. Obviously, their preference is going to influence what you choose as far as the mode. If you have a person who hates to run, then that's probably not something that you want to put in their program. It's got to be something that they enjoy. And then it also has to match their physical abilities. You have to look at those orthopedic concerns. If they have specific injuries, like a knee problem, again, running is probably not something you want to do with that client because that repetitive pounding is going to further aggravate their condition. Okay, so things to think about when you look at the mode. As far as intensity goes, there's different methods that we can use to monitor a person's intensity, but please note that intensity determines frequency and duration. So the more intense the aerobic exercise is, the duration normally decreases or the frequency might decrease. Okay, so the less intense it is, the duration normally increases or the frequency also increases. So some of the ways that we're going to talk about as far as determining the recommended intensity is the percentage of the age predicted max heart rate, or using the Carbonin method, or even using the RPE scale. Those are a few that are pretty popular. But please note the heart rate reserve method, the Carbonin method, is one that is most recommended for most clientele. And as far as apparently healthy folks, 50 to 85% of the heart rate reserve is the recommended range. So if you're designing a program for your client and you're using the Carbonin method to determine the recommended intensity as far as exercise heart rate goes, 50 to 85% is that general range. But note that extremely deconditioned people can begin at even 30%. So as low as 30% of a heart rate reserve and then start to work their way up. In addition to that, we can look at things like if they're on medications, right? If that client is on beta blockers, we know beta blockers slow down a heart rate. Okay, so using that Carbonin method is not something we want to rely on for an accurate indicator of if their intensity is working well or not. So instead, maybe using an RPE is a better method. So as far as calculations go, the first one is that age predicted max heart rate. General recommendations for healthy people for this is 70 to 85% of an age predicted max heart rate. I wouldn't recommend using this formula only because it is not relative to that individual. It does not include their resting heart rate. So for two people who are the same age, but they might have two totally different fitness levels, their age predicted max heart rate percent is going to be the same, which it shouldn't be though, right? So when we think about the heart rate reserve, the Carbonin method, that's when we factor in that resting heart rate, and that's going to be more accurate. So just a couple different formulas or equations that we gave you here. You can see for age predicted max heart rate, recommended percentages are 70 to 85%. So if we took a 40-year-old, their recommended range for heart rate is 126 to 153 beats per minute for their training zone. For heart rate reserve, using the Carbonin, remember the recommended range is anywhere from 50 or 55% to 80%. So in here, we just showed a 55 to 75% range, and their target zone is 124 to 149 beats per minute. RPE is another way that we can monitor the intensity. So normally the easiest one to use is the 1 to 10 scale. Somewhere between a 5 and a 6 is where we want our client to feel. So the thing is we want them to understand what a 5 feels like. And generally a 5 should correspond in most cases with a heart rate of 150. A 6 should be like 160. So it should be moderate, somewhat hard, but they could keep going. So getting your client to understand what that RPE scale is and how they should feel during that exercise is very helpful as well if you need to use that. METs, metabolic equivalents, are also something else that is used, but mainly we see this more in like cardiac rehab settings. So as a personal trainer, you're really not going to use it. But 1 MET is equal to 3.5 mLs per kg per minute. So that's the oxygen required for your body to function at rest. So at rest, we use 3.5 milliliters per kilogram per minute of oxygen. So what's basically saying that if an activity is at 4 METs, that it's 4 times harder than at rest. Okay, and in your book, they do have a published table on page 16.3 that goes through the different MET exercises and their metabolic equivalent value. Frequency, recommended frequency, according to the American College of Sports Medicine, is 2 to 5 days a week for most individuals. Obviously, the less fit is going to begin with a lower end, 2 days per week, and then the higher the fit population, they can go up to 5 or more days per week. The duration, again, it depends on the intensity. So the more intense the exercise is, the shorter the duration. Okay? So recommendations, the ACSM does say around 30 to 60 minutes of moderate intensity activity at least 5 days a week is the general recommendation. Or if they're doing vigorous intensity exercise, it's 3 days a week for 20 to 60 minutes. Now note in red, I did say that continuous or intermittent bouts accumulated throughout the day is going to get the same benefit. So for example, if your goal is to do 30 minutes of moderate intensity exercise, 5 days, you could do 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the afternoon. As long as they're getting their heart rate up within that recommended training zone that you're giving them, they're going to get the same cardiac benefit out of it as if they would have done 30 minutes all at once. So time factor is not, could not be an excuse anymore. A lot of people say, I don't have time to exercise, but according to that research, they really can't use that as an excuse. So as far as programming, what I did is I put together this kind of cheat sheet. So this is based on, a 35-year-old. So if their fitness classification is low, okay, so that means their VO2 is poor. Okay, so for females, anything below 29, males, anything below 35, that's considered poor for a VO2 max. So they would be a lower, level as far as fitness classification goes in regards to aerobic exercise. So here's your recommended intensity based on which method you use. If I'm going to use the age-predicted max heart rate, it's 60 to 70% of that. If I'm going to use the Carvonen method, 50 to 60% is a good range. If I'm going to use an RPE, a 5 and a 6 is good. The recommended duration, 20 to 30 minutes, 2 to 3 days per week. As their fitness level goes up and their VO2 score goes up as well, you can see the intensity, the duration, the frequency, they all tend to increase. So this is just kind of a cheat sheet to kind of walk you through how should I program for my particular client. Progression, the key is about 10%. Okay, so limit your increases in frequency, intensity, or duration to no more than 10%. Okay, and so that's something to think about. If I'm going to increase duration, it's 10%. Okay, if I'm going to increase frequency, it's 10%. Okay, don't try to do more than that. So as far as progression goes, your book gets lists into different phases. The initial phase is usually a 5 to 6 week period, and we want to minimize soreness and minimize discomfort. So the recommended frequency is 2 to 3 days a week, non-consecutive days. Recommended intensity, if you're using heart rate reserve, is about 70%. And then anywhere from 12 minutes up to 20 minutes is a good duration. So you're kind of progressing over those 6 weeks and getting up to that recommended 20 minutes. The improvement phase is anywhere from 5 to 6 months now. So you're doing 3 to 5 days a week. your intensity goes up from 70 to 85% of a heart rate reserve, and your duration increases every 2 to 3 weeks until they reach a maximum of 40 minutes, okay? Maintenance phase, you're going to go from 28 weeks and out. So they're just into a maintenance phase. They're happy where they're at, but we just want to maintain. So at least 2 days a week between the 70 to 85% of the heart rate reserve. Anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes per session is going to help them to maintain what they've built to that point. So as far as aerobic endurance training programs, there are a few that you can follow. One is long, slow distance. So basically you're going on a long run, for example, at a slow pace. So the time frame is anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours. So you're going at a less than race pace, but you're going to do a long, slow distance run, for example, or a ride or something of that nature. So it's a decrease in intensity, but you can increase your duration. So you're not running at that actual race pace or riding at that race pace or whatever it is. So when do we stop? Well, usually when the heart rate starts to increase. We want to reach a steady state heart rate, but if we tend to see it go up, that's an indicator that you should stop that. Another one is pace tempo training. So basically you're training at your goal pace, whatever that, race pace is, but you're doing it for shorter periods of time. So anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes. And there's two types of pace tempo training you can do. One is intermittent and one is steady state. So intermittent is doing 3 to 5 minutes of work followed by 30 to 90 seconds of rest or a slower pace. Whereas steady state is just the 20 to 30 minutes continuously at that race pace or that goal pace, whatever it is. So 1 to 2 days a week is a great way to incorporate that into an aerobic training program. Interval training is another pretty popular method, alternating high and low intensity exercise. So normally, you work for 3 to 5 minutes and then you maybe rest. Or again, maybe I'm going to run on the treadmill at 5 miles an hour for 3 minutes, and then I'm going to walk at 3 miles an hour for 3 minutes. So that would be a 1-to-1 ratio. So I'm working at a pretty, intense effort for 3 minutes, and then I'm working again, but a less intense effort for that same 3 minutes. So generally that work to rest is, a 1-to-1 ratio, or even could be a 1-to-3 ratio. And then the last a couple other types are circuit training, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with. You've been doing it already in your programming. Cross training is, different modes. I'm going to bike for the next 6 weeks, then I'm going to swim for 6 weeks, and then I'm going to run for 6 weeks. Those are examples of cross training. And then arm exercise for those folks that, maybe are handicapped or they're in a wheelchair and they can't use their legs. Arm ergometers are a great way to get the heart rate up, so that's an option for those particular clientele. And then, of course, some people combine aerobic and resistance training together. It's a great way to get a total body workout, but get your heart rate up too. Okay, so there's different things that we can do as far as what types of aerobic exercise can we do with our client. So I did provide a case study here about Tom. He's 35 years old, resting heart rate. What I'd like you to do is to pause the video and go ahead and find your answers, get your answers to that case study. And then when we come together tomorrow in our meeting, I'd like to have your answers. So what is his intensity using the Carbonin method? So the 70 to 85% of the, or I'm sorry, Carbonin is 50 to 85% of the heart rate reserve. What's his recommended frequency based on his status? And then develop a 6-week just aerobic training program showing progressions. Okay, so I'd like you to have some answers to those 3 questions tomorrow that you can share with the rest of the class. Okay, and then also, what are your answers to your check your understanding? This first one about RPE. Okay, so answering those 2 slides. So we will talk about those tomorrow when we meet in our face-to-face virtual classroom meeting. In addition to that, I did want to show you, I put together a few questions that I'd like you to answer regarding Chapter 16. So if you scroll down under the Content button, you'll see Chapter 16 PowerPoint Lecture Questions. So you're going to open those up, and basically after viewing the PowerPoint, viewing my video here, and reading the book, you're going to be able to answer these questions. Okay, so I'd like you to type your answers out on your computer. Okay, notice the last question is your client, and answering some questions regarding your client in aerobic programming. So once you've answered all those, then you're going to submit that into the assignment folder, because I did associate points with this. So since we're not meeting face to face, I want to make sure that you're reading the chapters and you're getting a good understanding of it. So I've created an assignment folder right here, Chapter 16 PowerPoint questions. Okay, so those questions I'll set as a due date this coming Sunday, 11:59 p.m. So what I'll try to do is keep the same due date each week for everything, and we'll just set it at Sunday night, 11:59 p.m. So you're going to upload those questions right into that folder so I can grade them for you. I see that not everybody has submitted their Chapter 15 case studies. Only 9 of you have submitted those. Those were already due as of yesterday. So please, if you haven't submitted those, make sure you get those in ASAP, because I'd like to get those graded as well. So if you have any questions, let me know. But like I said, when we meet tomorrow in the virtual classroom, we're going to go through those last 2 PowerPoint slides and get an answer, see if everybody found their answers, and see what we're doing there, and then have time to talk about other items you might want to talk about. So have a good day.